Yeah, I thought about that. We'll leave these right here. Good evening. Good to have you all here. You all turn number 336. Number 336. We'll sing this song, and Brother David will lead some prayer, and we'll have our class. Is it for me? Number 336. Let's all sing. Is it for me, dear Savior, thy glory and thy rest? For me so weak and sinful, oh, shall I be so blessed? Oh, Savior, my Redeemer, what can I but adore? And magnify and praise thee and love thee evermore. Is it for me thy welcome, thy gracious intervention? For me thy coming blessed, for me so full of sin. Oh, Savior, my Redeemer, what can I but adore? And magnify and praise thee and love thee evermore. I'll be with thee forever and never grieve thee more. Dear Savior, I must praise thee and love thee evermore. Oh, Savior, my Redeemer, what can I but adore? And magnify and praise thee and love thee evermore.
Stay fully to each other. My father was sick, they were with us, as you with them, granting a nice rest of his own will, a quick recovery of his own will, Father. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, good evening. We're talking about Jonah. This is what they're talking about at camp as well. So these are questions that Rob had given me while we were going down there. So if you have any questions about these questions, talk to Rob. Put all blame on him. He has questions here that are covering the whole book of Jonah, which is just 4 chapters. I think we all know this book, but I'm going to go ahead and read it quickly so that we can have an idea of what is being said here. I got some papers right over there in the corner. We're studying the book of Jonah. So I'll read the book of Jonah real quick. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for the evil has come up before me. But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it. to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. For the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, and that the ship threatened to break up. And the mariners were afraid, and each cried one to his God. And they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone down to the inner part of the ship and had lain down and was fast asleep. So the captain came and said to him, What do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, go out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us, that we may not perish. And they said to one another, Come, let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account this evil has come to us. So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. They cried and said to him, Tell us of whose account this evil has come upon us. What is your occupation? And where do you come from? What is your country? And what of what people are you? And he said to them, I am a Hebrew. I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who has made the sea and the dry land. And the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, What is this that you have done? For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord, because he had told them. Then they said to him, What shall we do to you, that the sea may quiet down for us? And the sea grew more and more tempestuous. So he said to them, Pick me up and hurl me into the sea, and the sea will quiet down for you. For I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon us. Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to get back to dry land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and the tempest grew against them. Therefore they called out to the Lord, O Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us innocent blood for you. O Lord, I have done as is pleased you. So they picked up Jonah and hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. And the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. The Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord and his God for the belly of the fish, saying, I called out to the Lord out of my distress. He answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All the waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight. Yet I shall again look upon the holy temple. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped around my head. The roots of the mountains I went down to the land, whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit. O my Lord, when my life was fading away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you in the holy temple. Those who pray regard in vain idols forsake the hope of steadfast love. But I, with the voice of thanksgiving, sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. The Lord spoke to the fish and vomited Jonah out upon the dry land. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and call out against it the message that I tell you. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, 3 days' journey in breadth. Jonah began to go into the city, going a day's journey. He called out, Yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. And the people of Nineveh believed God. They called for a fast and put on sackcloth from the greatest of them to the least of them. And the word reached the king of Nineveh, and he rose from his throne, removed his robe, covered himself with sackcloth and sat in ashes. And he issued a proclamation to publish throughout Nineveh, by the decree of the king and his nobles, let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock taste anything. Let them not feed for drink water, but let the men and the beasts be covered with sackcloth, and let them call out mightily to God. Let everyone turn from his evil way and from the violence that was in his hands. Who woes? God may turn his relent, and turn from his fierce anger, so that he may not perish. When God saw what they did, how they turned away from the evil, God relented of the disaster that would have come to them, and he did not do it. But it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was angry. He prayed to the Lord and said, O Lord, it is not what I said when I was yet in the country. This is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish, for I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, and relented from disaster. Therefore, now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. O Lord, do you well to be angry? Jonah went out of the city and sat at the east of the city and made a booth for himself there. He sat under it in the shade till he said, See what would come come with the city. And the Lord God appointed a plant and made it come up over Jonah, that it might be a shade over his head, to save him from the discomfort. So Jonah was exceedingly glad because of the plant. But when dawn came on the next day, God appointed a worm that attacked the plant so that it withered. When the sun rose, God appointed a scorching east wind, and the sun beat down on the head of Jonah, so that he was faint. And he asked that he might die, and said, "It is better for me to die than to live." But God said to Jonah, "Do you do well to be angry for the plant?" He said, "Yes, I do well to be angry enough to die." And the Lord said, "You pity the plant for which you did not labor, nor did you make it grow, which came into being in the night and perished in the night. And should not it pity Nineveh, the great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left, and also much cattle?"
Translation.
ESV, English Standard Version.
It's not nearly as clear.
I think it's clear. Personal preference.
No, it's all right. I'm glad you did. It's good to read different.
Oh, yes, it's always. It's always also good to look at the Hebrew as well, see what that word actually means. All right, so we're on the first page, which would be salvation as seen in Jonah. And the reason why I read the whole chapter is because these questions jump around pretty quickly. You see in question 1 and question 2, they go from chapter 1 to chapter 4 as well. So the first question is, what effort was made by the sailors in relation to their own salvation and that of Jonah? Verses 5, 13, and 15. It kind of shows a pattern here of the people. What do they do in verse 5? Yeah. First thing is they were going to try to save everybody in the boat by throwing off everything that they could. And so what happened in 13? Oh no, I want to point out one more thing. What else did they do? They did one more other thing out there as well. The first part of verse 5.
Sleep.
Yeah, Jonah went down to sleep, but they cried out to their gods. Yeah, they were crying out to their own individual gods. At this time, each one had a different set of gods depending upon where they lived. So the first thing they turned to was their gods and trying to light the boat to save themselves. And then what was the next thing they did in verse 13?
Give us that again.
Verse 13, what do they do after they tried to pray to their gods? They light the load, right? They already tried to do that. And they tried to row. They tried to save themselves and everybody. At this time, they cast lots, and Jonah had told them what they were what was going on, why there was a storm. You know, why he was able to sleep through the middle of the storm. Because Jonah knew exactly what was happening. And yet they tried to, instead, going against what God said, they tried to save themselves by just rowing harder. But we can see what they ended up having to do in verse 15, which was what? Yeah, they picked him up and threw him in the sea, which was the obedience to God, God's word there. So, as far as what efforts are made, sailors in relation to their own salvation. As far as for their salvation, they relied upon their own gods, and they relied upon themselves, and then they listened to the true God as far as obedience. And they didn't have any rest for salvation until they listened to the true God. And that's what's being pointed out. Yeah, he already told them to do it. They didn't do it. He said they tried to row themselves to save. Yeah, Jonah told them the reason why they were having the storm and the only way to calm it down. And so they tried to come back and do it differently than what was said. All right, number 2, what was necessary for salvation to be accomplished? You can look at verse 1:15 and also Jonah 4:2. As we saw in 15, it was throwing Jonah overboard in order to please God there. And in 4:2, it says, and he prayed to the Lord and said, O Lord, is it not this what I said that was yet in the country? This is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish, for I knew that you are gracious God, merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, and relenting from disaster. What was necessary for salvation to be accomplished? What did the Ninevites have done? What did they do? In verse 15, they listened and threw him over. What did the Ninevites do at this point? In 4:2, what had they done at this time? They believed in God. They were obedient to God. They were obedient to what God had said. They also had taken action. It wasn't just a belief. It was also an action to follow. They had repented of what they had done, the sins. They put themselves in sackcloth. They also put their animals in sackcloth. They truly repented of their sins. And so we see, of course, the question there is the necessary for salvation to be accomplished is obedience. It's 100% obedience to God and following His word exactly. Even when they tried, back in chapter 1, they tried to row to their safety. That didn't save them. It was the obedience that they had to have to God. There's no way around His path. It's only directly through. All right, number 3. What blinded Jonah for the need of salvation? Whose salvation was Jonah trying to get? Or who was God wanting salvation of? What people was he trying to save? The Ninevites. And so what blinded Jonah from the need for their salvation? What were the Ninevites? Jonah was a Jew, so what were the Ninevites? Gentiles, yeah. What do we know about the Jews and the Gentiles in this time? Enemies, yeah. They didn't like each other at all. I think what really blinded Jonah was the prejudice against the Gentiles. These were unclean people, ungodly people. They didn't have the law. They weren't as good as what the Jews were at the side of Jonah. They were basically like rats. And he didn't want to be around them. He didn't want to eat with them. He didn't want to be with them. He followed the law. Even though during this time he was under the king of Jeroboam II, which we know is a wicked king who allowed different in Israel. But yet, they still saw themselves separate from the Gentiles. Anybody else have any other thoughts on that? All right. Number 4, what can blind us for the need for salvation? Yep, ourselves. It's really easy for us to see it in other people, but not to see it in ourselves. A lot of times the best judge, if you stand back and look at yourself as a third party, you can always be the best judge of yourself by judging yourself with God's standard. What else can make us blind from our sins? The need for salvation. What about worldly items? Achieving power, achieving things that God has not set out for us. The worldly pleasures here on earth. If you look at Solomon, is a good case of somebody who completely turned away against his own counsel. He gives great advice in Proverbs, great wisdom, but then completely turns against exactly what he had told everybody else to do. Following after the worldly pleasures. So anything that's basically against God or doing what you're, following your own self is generally what is going to cause that. So number 5, how is the blindness expressed in the New Testament? Acts 10 and 11. What's Acts 10 and 11 about? Mm-hmm. Yep. And what does Peter see? And what happens in Acts 11? It starts at 10 and it goes into 11. What's Peter doing that's similar to Jonah with the Ninevites?
So he's going back home. Get back home and explain, having to explain that the Jewish Christians that want to go there.
Yeah, why was he with the Gentiles? It's a similar issue here. And he was blind to what originally God had said, what God had given him in his dreams. But then he understood it later that he could associate with the Gentiles and teach them and eat with them. And that bridge had been taken away. The same thing here. You look at Jonah. Jonah was blind to teaching the Ninevites because he had seen them as unclean. Well, even though that God had told him that he should go there. All right. Number 6. How would you consider Jonah's preaching? Was it positive or negative? Yeah. It says, and yet 40 days Nineveh shall be overthrown. I mean, to me, that would be a pretty negative comment. Yeah, you're living wicked, and you will be overthrown. God has set this in place. But the thing is, how would you consider that preaching? Was it positive? Was it a successful message?
Yeah. Believe God.
Yep. Yeah, it was successful. Nowadays we see, I know we've heard it so many times, there's so much positive preaching out there. But sometimes negative preaching is needed. That way you can know that you are in sin. Yeah, because unless somebody tells you don't know you're sinning.
Every preacher that preaches the truth on sin is looked on by people in the world as negative. For everything, that's positive. And that's the way the world tries to be. But you can't be a Christian if you don't have a lot of negative in you too. All against evil. Say no to the devil. Anything else you want to hear?
You're doing a good job. I can't go get somebody who's preached as long as you have. We know the Word of God tells us how we should live, how we shouldn't live. And we can use the standard that we should be judged by when we are Christians. And the thing is it's not really the person that's doing the judging part of preaching. It's God that's doing that judging. It's God who's doing the teaching. It's the Word of God that pricks the heart. All right, so what evidence is a change in 3:5, which I think we've already talked about them fasting and then in sackcloth. And what is the point of fasting? Why do we
get close to God?
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get away from things in the world?
Yeah.
I wonder about that. If anybody's ever had the success Jonah did, if you look at verse 8.
Verse 8 of chapter 3.
That's 30, verse 8. Cover with sackcloth and beasts, dry night. Turn everyone from his evil way and from the violence that is in their hands.
Yeah. That's 120,000 people.
Yeah.
That
never happens again, has it?
No, I don't think so. And not that we have heard of. That's definitely a large, especially at this time, 120,000 people was a large city as well.
Verse 10, what did God do?
He relented his disaster.
How does God repent? Since God repented,
Yeah. He turned away from what he did.
And he had said that he would do unto them. So God changes his mind when he sees that it's necessary. They don't change it.
No. No, I think you can see that through the Old Testament. There's several occasions that's happened where the people repented, or God asking for the people to repent. He would change his mind. We see the evidence of changes in verse 5 as far as the fasting and the sackcloth, putting that on. It's full repentance. It's an outward sign there of that change. And then what was the evidence of the change in the sailors, verses 1, 14, and 15? What was the evidence there that they were obedience to God for salvation? It was by their action. They took throwing them overboard. Going from rowing to try to save themselves to listening to what God said and throwing them overboard. Then number 9, describe what Jonah went through in his heart that led to the salvation from the fish, verses 2:10. I also add there 2:9 as well, so I thought it should be 2:9 and 10. And 2:9 and 10 say, "But I wish the voice of thanksgiving will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will pray, I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. The Lord spoke to the fish and vomited Jonah out on dry land." So what did he go through in the heart that led to salvation? Yeah. And salvation belongs to the Lord. That statement there, I think a lot, thanksgiving of what God has given him, his sacrificing him, not letting him drown in the sea, but providing a fish to swallow him up. Being inside of a fish for 3 days had to be a rough ride in the sea. They've said that there was actually a guy who's actually been swallowed by a fish before, and they cut him out. That was only a couple hours, which was a big fish. But still, think about that's a tight area. So it would not be a pleasant place to be at all. And he was able to still live, and God was able to make it to where he could come out on dry land. And then number 10 was Jonah's change of heart complete. Verse 4:1. No. Yeah, he was angry with what God had done. So you can see, you see here a man of God who was told to follow God, and then at the end of it, he's still angry. Even though all that he has seen and experienced. Any thoughts or questions on salvation as seen in Jonah? Alright. The salvation we can see is the obedience of God. There. Very important. And then going on to that, talk about the disobedience as revealed in Jonah. Somebody would define sin as occurred 1 John 3:4. Somebody has that. We want to read that. Okay. So sin is the transgression of the law, or lawlessness. What type of sin is described in the example of the people in Nineveh? Verses 1, 2. And also you can look at Jonah 3:8 as well. Yeah, they're evil ways. That's not obeying God, not listening to God. not doing what God has commanded. What were these people? Why would they obey God? What were they under? As far as what law would they follow? What rules would they follow in obedience to God? It wouldn't be the law of Moses, would it? No, it'd be the law of the fathers at that time still. They still had the example. They didn't have the law of Moses, but when Jonah came and spoke to them, he would give them at least, I would assume it would be more of a moral law. That's just an assumption of what it would be in order to follow God and His will. Yeah, I think that's what the Jews actually thought. I think that's the reason why. That's the reason why Jonah did not, want to go to these people because he thought they were old. God was theirs. They had a monopoly on God, basically. In which we can see here, God is He's a God of everyone, not just a specific people. He did make that covenant with the Jews themselves. So let's go on to number 3. What activities are considered in this sin? We have 4 different verses here, or a couple, 4 different sections here. Someone wants to read Romans 1:20 through 28. And somebody else just pick Ephesians 4:17, another Titus 3:3, and 1 Timothy 1:9-10. It's got Romans 1:20-23.
For the visible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because that, when they knew God, they glorified Him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and foolish hearts were darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made not corruptible man, and birds and corporate beasts, creeping things. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness to the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God to a lie, and worship and serve the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever and ever. Amen. With this cause God gave them up to all afflictions, for even their women to change their natural use into that which was against nature. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of woman, burdened in lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving themselves a recompense of error which is new. Even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to the reprobate mind to do those things which were not convenient.
Okay. So I had 4 major things that were in that. What would you consider them to be? You don't have that 4. Just what were some things that were mentioned here? Activities considered in sin. I'd say I had pride, idols, lust of the flesh, and homosexuality. Some clear statements there about what was sin, considered sin. These are things, the evil that is being done, and most likely done.
Anyone who thinks homosexuality is all right, I'll read Romans 1:3 times.
All right. There's several places. I don't understand why there's people, or I guess you could say people that call themselves Christians today that believe homosexuality is okay.
It seems like God gave so much attention to that because you see how the world is done.
Mm-hmm.
But He sure did lay it out here on the wall.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can't be no doubt about what God considers to be sin. You read Romans 1.
I know. It's clear. I'm talking about that. We've got Ephesians 4:17 through 19. Just want to read that.
It says, "They therefore testify the Lord that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk in the vanity of their mind, having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them because of the blindness of their heart, who being past feeling have given themselves over unto lasciviousness to work all uncleanness and greediness."
Okay. So what's the sins there? Vanity of mind, ignorance of God. A lot of people don't think that is a sin. That if you don't know God, then you're just a lot of people say ignorance is bliss. But ignorance of God and ignorance of His Word is a sin. And lasciviousness, and I looked up that was sodomy. When I looked up to the Hebrew, there's another area there as far as for talking about homosexuality there. That's clear. That's a very clear thing as a sin of God. And also greediness, wanting more just to have more, to gain more. We all know that God does. God will give you what you can handle, but it's all God's at the end of the day. If it's not yours, and taking that and thinking that it is yours, that it's only yours and that you gain it, that's where the greediness comes in. You're always searching for more, not just having what God has given you. And also Titus 3:3. Titus 3:3. Somebody have that? Okay. So that clearly gives us a good list there. Foolish, disobedient, deceived, lustful, malice, envy, hatefulness. Hating your brother, or hating in general, that's is definitely a sin. And also 1 Timothy 1:9-10. Whoever's got that.
As knowing this, that law is not made for righteous men, but for the lawless and unruly, for the ungodly and sinners, for the unholy and profane, for murderers, fathers, and murderers, and mothers, for manslayers, for fornicators, for abusers of themselves with men stealers, for liars, for false swearers, and if there be any other thing contrary to the sound doctrine.
Okay. So we can see there another list of sins. Other activities are considered sin: lawless, disobedient, ungodly, profane, murderers, whoremongers, liars. Then you also got homosexuality again in there. There's a bunch of different sins we can see that are considered, the activities are considered sin. So number 4, how is Jonah's sin different from the people's in Nineveh? How is Jonah's sin different? I hope I answered the question as wrong with one. I thought maybe different than y'all's. What was his sin? How was his sin? What was he? Yeah. But what was he doing? What sin was he committing? He was disobedient to God. But so were people in Nineveh, right? was angry. But how is this sin different from the Israelites? What's the only difference? He never repented. No, he never did that. I had a different thought. He was a Jew. That was a big difference too. He had the priest that could fit. He could follow the law, going to the priest. He could cry to God, being with God. But yet, also, he never repented at the end. He turned around and was angry. Yeah. They were ignorant. He wasn't. They knew God.
How many unforgiven sins do you have to admit to be lost?
One. Sin is sin.
I think the book of Jonah did very clearly.
All right, so number 5, how is Jonah's sin the same as theirs? I think we just answered that. Sin is sin. No matter what, it doesn't matter if you're God's chosen, part of God's chosen, if you're part of the Gentiles, if you're not part of God's chosen. Sin is sin. Same thing as if you're a Christian, your sin is the same as if you're not a Christian. Your salvation is different, but your sin is still sin. And all salvation comes by being obedient to God. I don't think we have any non-Christians here, so. I also explained how James 2:10 and 11 applies to Jonah. Somebody wants to read that real quick.
Whosoever should keep the whole law, and yet offends one point is guilty of all. For he who said, do not commit adultery, said also, do not kill. Now, if thou commit no adultery, yet if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law.
You have to break the law just once.
That's it. He broke the law. He was disobedient to God, committing that sin. Therefore, he broke the whole law. Number 7, how can the sin of Jonah be applied to those in the church today?
One, you can run. You can run from the sin. Hide.
Yeah.
You know, go down in the ship, hide.
Yeah. Your sin still follows you.
Face it.
Yeah, that's the only way, facing it with God. And sometimes sin.
Your own method, that don't work.
Right. We've shown in our class what we do over there in Proverbs. Sin, even if you repent of your sin, it still has consequences at later. It's still consequences that will follow the day later on. We've been talking about our adultery in there in Proverbs. That sin that stains and lasts further and further, even though you can still have forgiveness of it. There's still a stain that will stay with you forever. Sin will linger on. The main point is the sin of Jonah applies to the church today. In my opinion, was that one sin can make you lost. Being disobedient to God can make you lost. And then let's see, number 8. What does the account of Jonah 3:10 and 4:1 tell us about Jonah's problem?
What? Genesis what?
Jonah 3:10 and 4:1. God had turned from destroying the Ninevites, and Jonah was angry. And so the question is what does this tell us about Jonah's problem? Which I think we've touched upon. The problem was in his heart. He still had that prejudice against the Gentiles there. And then, since we're trying to hurry up, what does Matthew 15:8? Does Matthew 15:8 apply to this situation? 15:8. Matthew 15:8. people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far, far from me. Do you think that applies? Does that apply to Jonah? He's able to preach God's word, but his heart's not there. His heart is somewhere else. He's got contempt against the Ninevites. And then what does Romans 6:17 through 18 teach concerning their actions in relation to God? Romans 6:17 through 18. It says, but thanks be to God that you who were once slaves of sin have become obedient from the heart to which that standard teaching to which you were committed, having been set free from sin, having become slaves of righteousness. What does Romans teach concerning the actions in relation to God? Yeah, obedience. Because in the end, we're servants. We are slaves. We're servants of God. It's about doing His will, not doing what our hearts say, but doing what God says. And always knowing that we are slaves of God. I think it's a big key to that part of the heart, being thankful for everything we get from God that He gives it to us, and do what He has commanded to us out of thankfulness to Him, and being cheerful. And then number 11, the last question: how do we keep from doing things with the wrong heart? I thought about this. Yeah. I look at Colossians 3:24-25. These are my answers. You can tell me if I'm wrong or right on that. Colossians 3:24-25. Which says, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. For the wrongdoer who will be paid back for the wrong he has done. There is no partiality. Working for the Lord, being a servant to the Lord. I think there's, if you're not idle, then you're always working and serving the Lord, your heart will be there. Because you're putting your heart and your soul into that action. And then my other thing I had on there was the Beatitudes. Living as the Beatitudes, that will definitely give you a heart, keep your heart from being wrong. Any thoughts or questions on this lesson? I think Rob did a good job putting it together. This time Roy will offer the invitation. If you want to turn to 337. Or 337, that'll be our invitation. It's all except for you're only there. You're just there.
337. Normally I don't preach to less than 100. So y'all have let me preach. I don't want ever. I thought tonight I'd get ready to get to preach. He's looking at his watch right now. No, I believe we've got some great preaching going on here. We need to be, and we need to develop preachers. I sure do miss preaching. It's been my life for so long. And I sure do miss it. And I ain't going to lie to you about it, but I don't want the job back. I want to get out and find a place where I can preach. And I will. It may be at the prison. It may be at the hen house. What'd you say, honey? Maybe at the kitchen. No, she sure did. No, it's a wonderful life. It meant a lot to me, and I still would like to preach, but I know that small boats are going to stay close to shore. And I have had mine. You're coming home, you got your livelihood. Take advantage of every opportunity you get to preach, because that's the way you got to do it. That's the way I do it. I went anywhere, any place, preached. And I can tell you story after story about some of them. Wasn't very much going on, but God opened the doors, allowed me to preach. Brethren were very nice to me, because they looked over my ignorance and said, he's ignorant, you can't have it. God put him through the food, so I don't believe that, but I'm hoping for that. Now tonight, I want to look at one verse of Scripture. Since I hadn't preached in about 6 months, a year or 2 years, I'm planning on just preaching about 4 hours. Did you see what he did? No, I want to preach on 1 John 4. I'm going up Bible. I can't do much with it. 1 John 4, verse 14, I think. I'm reading from First Philippians 2. And I want to read verses 12 and 13 and 14. And I won't preach for about 5 minutes. Wherefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. If you think about that verse, you always obey. And when you always obey, what do? You work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Nobody can tell you if you obey God ultimately and finally, but you. You take your heart and you compare it to God's Word. Nobody can do that any better than you, although they may have more knowledge than you. For it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do his good pleasure. God works through us. In the next verse, I've been trying all my life to overcome. Perhaps you can give me the way to do it. Do all things without murmurings and disputings. My wife says sometimes, you go around like an old dog. That's your reaction. But no, she don't. But she probably will after this. But if we could just obey that part of the Bible, we'd grow. Do all things without murmuring and disputing. We spend half an hour time murmuring, disputing, and trying to settle it. But we'll always have to. Because how many of us sin? All of us. How many of us need to repent? Therefore, all of us. How many of us need to come back to the church? All of us have sinned. How many of us need to obey the gospel? Everyone that's ever sinned has never obeyed the gospel. If you're here tonight, you're not a member of the Lord's church. I don't know what I can do that you don't already know. This may be your last night on earth. It may not. This may be as close as you're ever going to get to obeying the gospel. This may be as close as you're ever going to get to confessing your faults if you need to. If you don't need to, look at yourself carefully and sincerely. Don't worry yourself to death about it. There is no doubt in my mind that he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved if he does all that correctly from all his past sins. I never have doubted my salvation, though I obeyed you earlier, but I understood what was going on. I don't mind it when people say I didn't understand. I think that's a great move, and I need to do it over again to be sure I done it right. And then, of course, the church is a family. In that family of a father, yes, he directs it. We do what the Father says. And we do it without murmuring and complaining. Now that does not mean that we don't say, oh, it's too hot, or I wish the heat was up some, or it's human nature to complain. I don't recommend it. But that means do all things that murmuring complain among yourselves. I always like to work with people who work together. Me and my brother were office too to work together because they're on this earth. I don't think you probably use the cross-cut saw much. They're not much in the mold anymore. When we went to the wood pile, we had to saw the firewood and the stove wood. My brother would pull the saw through and turn it loose. And when I'd go to pull it, he'd do this with it. Now, if you've ever been on the other end of that handle, I've often thought of that in regards to this verse of Scripture. Do all things without murmuring and complaining. You may not be able to preach the greatest sermon. You may not be able to visit like you need to or won't try to. But one thing you can sure do for the Lord's church, you can stop your murmuring and complaining. I believe it would help the Lord's church more than any one thing you could name. You remember the Church of Christ said, I will not murmur or complain. I don't mean about the food. I mean about things spiritual, about souls, about church growth, about worship. Things that have eternal consequences. That don't mean you don't want them out. Rather than one of you be overtaken with a fault, don't go to that man, keep it quiet. A little misquotation there. Go to him, said it is fault. That's not murmuring. That's applying the word of God. But you walk in the church door and the church is too warm or too cold. The buildings are too big or too little. The preacher is too loud or too soft. And sometimes you need to let those things know. There's nothing wrong with it. My wife critiques me continually, and I tell her to. But I always tell her this rule. Before you say something bad about me, say something good about what I'm doing. And she always comes back with the same moment. When I get where I can understand you've done something good, I'll be glad to tell you. No, she has encouraged me all these years and put up with a lot of foolishness. If you're in this audience tonight, I know you are a Christian that is sincere. But it's my duty to tell you that if there is sin in your life that's public, you haven't straightened it out in a public way, a confession and prayer, you won't go to heaven if you die tonight. We could baptize you till we drown you. You wouldn't walk. Let's set out by saying we're going to look at ourselves. If we need to, we're going to confess our faults. If we don't, we're going to rejoice and remember the Lord's church and thank God that we have hope for salvation. And then we're going to try to encourage one another to do likewise. Think about your soul while it doesn't stand in what we say.
And the next is nailed to the cross. Is thy heart right with God? Dost thou count all things for Jesus but loss? Is thy heart right with God? Is thy heart right with God? Washed in the crimson blood, cleansed and holy, humble and holy, right in the sight of God. Are all thy hearts under Jesus' control? Is thy heart right with God? Does each moment abide in thy soul? Is thy heart right with God? Is thy heart right with God? Washed in the crimson blood, cleansed and holy, humble and
suppose somebody pointed for it. Know your colors.
I don't know if any announcements, anybody has got anything. Let's pray for that. Cover on that. Thanks, Kim. What I hear is going well, so that's a good thing. So we'll go to God in prayer this time. Dear Heavenly, most gracious Father, I'm grateful that we can come again. This small few here that we can come and stay with. Lord, we ask that we will always be a spiritual family, a congregation that worships you through the Spirit here in Robertson County. Lord, we ask that you be with the ones that are sick, especially Emily, their foot that would hopefully get better, and that she can be able to come back to us. Lord, we ask that you be with the ones that are camping, you will watch over them and allow them to be successful and reach anybody there that needs to hear your word. Lord, we're grateful for all that you've given us, especially we're grateful for the missionaries that you have overseas. Lord, we ask that with the issues that are going on in Nicaragua, the friends that we have there, that you will watch over them and they will be safe. Thank you for all that you've given us. In Jesus' name, we pray.
Bishop called. Did you? Yep. All right. What are you doing? All right. What are you doing? Yeah. It looks good. It is a one-penny stone. I thought it was a 2-penny. Well, I don't know. I have to look.
Hello, Barry. Hey, good to see you. Good to see you.
When I should. I've never seen you get so good at
Well, I'm sure there's so plenty in the sand. Just look at
one of them. One whose shirt's not supposed to be taken. They're popular now.
Oh, I wear this thing up lots. I like it.
It's your Christian shirt.
It's full country. She's mad at me.
Mom's with Dan.
I told you all.
Kiss the girls. Kisses the guys.
She's trying to get up there.
Just say bye. The big kid doesn't look like